will be in a win-win situation, and that can ensure sustainability.
I'm just going to emphasize a few points that might be raised as concerns against the ambitions of the manifesto as outlined by the chair of the subcommittee. One of the concerns that were raised by some commentators was, how do we strike a balance between the ambitions of this manifesto and the medium-term expenditure framework that was announced by the Minister of Finance last week? And here is how this must be understood. As far as we are concerned, they are not in conflict. The budget framework must be understood as a product of the current context that is constrained. But the manifesto intends to help change that underlying context so that the MTEF can, over time, be amended to reflect an improving economic performance. So there is no contradiction between the two. The manifesto appreciates the current constraints of the moment, the low growth environment, the low tax revenue environment, the logistics infrastructure impact on that. But part of what the manifesto then says is that we've got to build industrial interventions that can help us to reorganize an industrial strategy, industrialization, this and that. This is what we are proposing must be an understanding of what the manifesto is trying to do. We say that we need to start thinking about industrial policy as what is called a transmission channel. And what does that mean? It means if you are going to have an increasing revenue base, there's got to be improvement in productivity and output. If there's more productivity output, there's more revenue generated and therefore an expanded capacity by the fiscus to finance all of these things. But if you don't have industrial growth, over the long term, you'll not have the ability to sustain your fiscal position. So the main concern that the manifesto is bringing is that job creation on the back of an industrial strategy is our best foot forward. And we acknowledge that for us to have a viable industrial strategy, we're going to have to deal with what we call the binding constraints. Transnet-related logistics, ESCOM-related energy problems, and water infrastructure, as the chair was raising. The other point that might be contentious is the subject of prescribed assets, as the chair has raised here. Importantly, the issue about what is the fate of Regulation 28, given that it was amended in 2022. But let's start just at the theoretical level so that all of us are proceeding on a common understanding. Economic theory proceeds from the understanding that investment is positively related to national savings. So the higher the national savings are, the higher the levels of investment in the productive economy are supposed to be. But what Regulation 28 has done, that amendment, unintentionally, is to lead to the offshoring of increasing quantities of South African savings to foreign markets, which means in a South African industrial economy that is starved of significant quantities of capital, it is not a strategic approach to managing our national pensions and national savings. That's the first part. So we're going to have a discussion with the pensions industry. It's not that there's going to be an arbitrary move on Regulation 28, but we are proposing that we've got to go back to the table and have a discussion. Did we do right in 2022 and what do we do going forward? The second dimension of it is the prescription we are thinking about is not just related to government bonds as the reaction has tended to be. Anyone who studies the South African capital markets will realize an anomaly that says the bulk of the pension funds, when invested in South Africa, they go to at least the top 100 listed firms in the JSE, which means companies that fall below the 100 line, they don't have as much access to South Africa's savings for their own expansion and investment. So we are trying to think of a creative way by which we can have a discussion about how better do we restructure the access to the savings portfolio in South Africa's economy so that even the small to medium companies can have access at a scale that is similar to the bigger companies. Of course, the quantities will not be the same, but we want to have a proportionally improved access for smaller firms. And this is crucial if South Africa is to modernize its economy and improve investment in innovation, especially innovative technologies, for instance. As we have a discussion now in South Africa about the green transition over time, one of the key questions will be, where does everyone else who wants to participate in that sector access capital to finance their participation at that level? So these are some of the underlying thoughts that we are thinking about. And I'm explaining this because the reaction so far has just been about, oh no, they are raiding our pensions. They want us to buy government bonds. Oh, no. The manifesto is not predicated on a lunatic misunderstanding of how markets function and how the economy functions. It is about trying to synthesize the information symmetry between the state and the market so that we could have a broadly shared understanding of national goals. Thank you very much, Sondo.
Thank you very much, Comrade Zuko. At this point, I'm going to turn to members of the media for your questions. We also are now joined by one of our National Executive Committee members who also happens to be a deployee of the ANC's in her capacity as Minister of Transport, Comrade Cindy Chikunga. So please fire away. I'm looking for hands. I'm going to start on my right. I don't see any hands on my right. Do we have anyone this side? And I'm going to also just request that it is one question, and then we'll always come back to you, but to allow for a broader engagement. I don't see any hands this side. I'm going to come to my left. Can I have a look? Is it Sunday Times? Sunday Times newsroom in that.
What is the percentage of raw minerals or materials that you want to be processed in the country? Have you even spoken of the young people between the age of 16 and 29? The chairperson of the subcommittee for economic transformation just spoke now about how young people not being unemployed in South Africa is a ticking time bomb. Is the ANC worried about these young people, about 500,000 of them, who have newly registered not voting for the ANC based on the fact that this current administration has failed to create jobs for them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to proceed to my sister over here before I go this side.
Amanda Koza from the News 24. My question was directed to the Minister of Electricity. Yesterday, the multi-party charter said that under their government, the first ministry that get rid of is the electricity ministry. I just want to know, what is your response to that criticism that they feel that you haven't been performing or managed to turn around the situation?
All right, thank you very much. Shall I, at this point, just ask for those questions to be responded to by our panel? And I'm actually going to start with the last and ask Comrade Josienso to come on stream. Between Comrade Zuko and the chair of the ETC subcommittee, you can decide which of the two questions you will handle. But I will start with the very last one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. When the President introduced the ministry, he makes the point that in his considered opinion, we needed a focused attention on the execution and prosecution of the Energy Action Plan that he had unveiled to the country in July of 2022. And in his own articulation is that the ministry represents a focused intervention, and that post the sixth administration there will be a reconfiguring of government. So in effect, in the ANC's own consideration, we do not see this as a permanent solution to the resolution of the electricity crisis, but essentially as an intervention. So there is nothing new, there's no discovery that was made yesterday. So that's the first point. The second one is that we have been able to illustrate that over the past 12 months, calendar year, January of 2023 to January of 2024, as a result of our focused intervention and the execution of the Energy Action Plan, we have been able to add an additional 3,500 megawatts to the grid. We have prioritized 6 power stations, Kendal, Krill, March to January of 2024. We have been able to reduce the number of load shedding hours by 600 hours in that period, as an example. And the point we are making is that the trend line is going down. And also what we've been saying is that the most enduring resolution to the energy crisis is not just the sole focus on the generation units at ESCOM. They are aging. They are going to become less and less efficient. So it's important that we are able to look at the new generation capacity from private sector, in particular, that from renewable sources of energy. And what have we achieved so far? So we know that there's a 66 gigawatt of private sector investment projects at various stages of the project life cycle. And when this combination of conservative forces introduce their load shedding, the plan to end load shedding, they say that what the country has not been told is that the majority of new generation capacity is coming from the private sector. That's absolutely correct, because we have introduced reforms on the generation side. The fact that we have relaxed the cap on embedded generation, the fact that there's no new requirement for you to register for with NERSA, participate on the generation side. All of those have made it possible for private sector to come into the party. So what's the point we are making? Is that this is a combination of a set of interventions that government has made that has enabled private sector participation. And that's why you are seeing, if you like, an insatiable appetite of private sector investment on the generation side. And of course, the second part that we are attending to is the issues around transmission, to ensure that we are able to aggressively onboard new generation capacity going into the future. So the point I'm making is that in the manifesto will not say, explicitly doesn't say you're ending load shedding. So it says that attend to the resolution of the energy deficit with the intention of ensuring that you are achieving energy sovereignty, so that we are able to achieve the first 4 priorities. The first 4 priorities are predicated, amongst others, on the existence of energy sovereignty. The manifesto does not introduce a new plan. The manifesto anchors the resolution of load shedding on the energy action plan that already exists. It simply says that it must be aggressively and expeditiously implemented, so that we are able to achieve the end goals as articulated in the manifesto, the outcomes of the various 4 priorities. Thanks.
I'm going to ask.
Thank you very much for the question. Let me start with the issue that has been raised by Amanda, because I do believe that Comrade Speaker can't defend himself. I do believe that those who are saying that he has not done a good job are just giving disservice to this country and the work that he has done. Many of us, maybe we take for granted the fact that we have moved from a point where there was lack of communication, information to South Africans, even to have a reliable, systematic way of knowing when load shedding is. Those were basic things that we're battling with. Information, he shares information. We might agree or disagree, but regular communication is there. We know what needs to be done, when it is to be done. We interact with him as the subcommittee regularly. We get feedback on what needs to be done, the issues of transmission lines investment in there, there's work that is being done, and there's progress. So even if we do not agree that the ministry should continue going forward, but we should never underplay the role and the work that has been done by Comrade Sputla. I mean, that's one of the things. Being able to have somebody who sits with the technical team, go focus on the generation, go to the plans. That focused area is what the president has committed to the country, and that is being achieved. I think it was important for me to deal with that. Then let me come to the issue raised by Kgothatso. When we reflect even more about the minerals of the future, for example, this is where we are saying, it can't be that you have industries that continue to exist in the country and loses majority of the people out. And that's why the existence as they start is important for us to ensure that we put policies and programs in place to support participation of black people. And that's why black people with disability, that's why there's this focus to say, let's reindustrialize, as Zuko was explaining, Comrade Zuko was explaining. Let's do that. And I know sometimes people say, okay, beneficial. Sometimes it's difficult to redo something that has been there. And that's why the emphasis when you look at the manifesto talks about the new industries. And I make an example of ICT sector. It was easy for us to get participation. But the issue again in some of the sectors is because you've got where the barriers of entry are higher. Because ICT, the barrier of entry is lower. So it's easy for people to automatically get in. But where barriers of entries are lower, you need a developmental state to be able to intervene. And that's part of what we are saying from a policy point of view, anchored by the Black Industrialist Program, because it's a support program to assist us to able to achieve what we do. And what is good about what we are making as a reference is that it's lessons learned. So we don't have to go to somebody and say, teach us how it's done. We've been able to learn out of some of these programs, see where the weaknesses are, enhance them, and that's why we can clearly articulate this is what it needs to be done. So it's the advantage, and that's why we always say it's an advantage because we've been in government. But the experience we carry, none of the political parties have. It's the experience of having practically, not from a theory point of view, but practically having done this, bend our fingers, make mistakes, and then we have learned out of those and say, this is what we are going to do. So I don't think it's not feasible. We can learn from many countries where they've been able to do some of the work that we're talking about. That's what I'm saying. Where you already have licenses, where you already have industries that are starting, it becomes a longer discussion, it becomes a prolonged intervention. But where it's new industries where you are issuing new licenses, this is what we want in the conditions of those licenses as part of ensuring that we can achieve our objective. That's why it's feasible. That's why we believe it's practically doable as what we are going to do. Then Junior asked about the issue of the job opportunities versus jobs. I think we keep on explaining this one, that what we reflect in the manifesto is the commitment from our side as government, and it's emphasized through the mass employment public program. Again, it's what we have been able to achieve. If you look at the ERRP, we committed to supporting, for example, programs such as teacher assistance in schools that we started as an initiative. It started with about 500 jobs. We expanded it to 1 million, and we've been able to deliver on that. Tangible results clearly can show we've given the update on the ERRP. So we are saying this area of mass employment program must be expanded to the 2.5 million by government. But this does not necessarily mean that all other areas are not going to create jobs. If you look at statistics, the comrades who will be coming as a second round of ETC, Comrade Togo will expand on how much this democratic government has expanded on the jobs in the agricultural sector. When you look at the figures there, you'd see that we've been able to exponentially increase the number of people who are employed in that area. Now, tourism remains critical as one of the sectors that is able to give us mass employment. That's why the recovery of tourism remains critical, and therefore starting to see the numbers of tourism, tourist arrival, especially international, but the growth of domestic tourism being critical as part of increasing the numbers towards what we had set as a target, because we were regressed by COVID. Remember, initially there was that we want to achieve almost 7 million of domestic tourism and 21 of international arrivals. Now, that's why we have to go back, and that's why some of the sectors remains critical for us to give us the job numbers that we want. And manufacturing and industrialization, because when you localize, you are able to increase the number of jobs. I don't know if you've seen VW being the one that is now South Africa going to be declared the country of only producing your polos in the country, in the global community. That's a confidence in our market. The recent one, we exporting the beef to UAE, Saudi, that we never did. It's confidence into our market, because when those happen, it's market access for us, but it continues to ensure that we can create jobs. So it's that issue. I always say to people, let's not fussy about whether it's job opportunities, it's jobs. But what is it that we are doing together? And that's why we call on private sector to come on board as well, to protect the sectors, give us what you expect us to do. That's why the issues around the joint operation, the joint working groups, to ensure that we protect industries, both in terms of government and business, whether you talk in the rail industry, and that's why we can talk about steel, because we were concerned, and that's why Minister of Trade and Industry had to go into that space and intervene so that jobs are not lost. So it's both the work that we have to do as government and also private sector. But government has to drive policy and policy changes, but enabling environment so that more jobs can be created beyond what we just have. You know, one of the things I talk about even on the employment is that we take for granted, somebody was saying this democratic government has actually made people lose more jobs. But we forget that, for example, those of us who are here in Gauteng, the entire of Midrand Waterfall Mall of Africa never existed pre-1994. This was built during this democracy. The people who are working there got these jobs under this dispensation. So it's those things that we've got to counter. How we lose jobs and we are worried about those that are unemployed. But let's not underplay the work that has been done and the strides that have been achieved. Quite a lot in terms of what we had to do. And it comes to the point that you raise about young people that are out of job. The issue there, that's why we've got to acknowledge, for you to be able to have the caliber of young people with the skills that required by the economy, the education part remains critical. So skilling is one of the areas that is important. The manifesto is talk about young people who are neither in employment nor in education. So a consolidated effort, and that's why we appreciate what Comrade Panyaza is doing, health skills. But again, some people will miss the point that pre-1994, and as we started the democracy, we only had one test training for artisans here in Ekurhuleni. Currently, you have massive of them across the country. Built so that young people, when they do these artisan skills, they are able to have they go to test centers, they can be accredited to be able to do the work. What we need to change in the mind of our South Africans is that it's not only degree that is important. It's all not vote for the NC. No, these are our Dinswalos. Their mothers are going to remind them, like my son, that I wouldn't be a minister today because if it was not the ANC of government that took me to school, TEFSA, that I didn't even have to pay anything because I was the child of a domestic worker, he wouldn't be having the education and the opportunities that they have. We are comfortable about the work that we have done, but we are acknowledging where there are weaknesses. One of the best things, and sometimes people say to us, it's a criticism that you create for yourselves and you self-criticize too much rather than praise as ANC. We are an organization compared to many others where we reflect on where the weakness we are going to do about it. And that's the pride we carry and the issues about experience that we carry.
Thank you very much, Comrade Kinsani. We have responded to the first set of questions. I just want to check whether we have any other. I do think that our two speakers were quite comprehensive and detailed, both in the responses of Comrade Hosienso, Comrade Zuko, and Comrade Mamoloko, the chair of the NEC subcommittee. But I see there's a hand over there. Can I just see hands to the right? That will be the last round that we do. I'm going to start at the back. Sorry, I just can't see the media house concerned. Let's introduce ourselves and then I will come down. There are two hands here and then we proceed in that order.
My name is Norman Masungwini.
Oh, Norman. City Press?
Yes.
Thank you.
My question is with regard to the manifesto. If you look at the 6 priorities, there seems to be a cut and paste from all the past. At what stage does the ANC say, we have done this, we have tried everything, now it's time to act on issues where we fail? In other words, do you sit and say, we give the employees of the party in government, do we hold them accountable, or at what stage do we say you have failed to deliver at your responsibilities to the point that we need to do something different? Because the criticism is almost the same, because the manifesto, if you look at job opportunities or jobs, now it's the load shedding and the rest. Do you take such criticism, and how do you respond to those?
Thank you very much, Norman. And then we move on to the next question over there.
Thank you. It's Yangelega Manjia at City Press. My question is about the president in the manifesto said that they are going to focus on fixing potholes and paving roads using public employment programs. And when we went to unveil the R23 in Mpumalanga, there were people that were complaining that those programs are favoring loyal party members. So my question is, how will the party ensure that there's transparency in terms of those programs? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take the last 2 questions and that will be the last round of hands.
Good morning. I'm Nalini Toro from the SABC. My question is with regards to the creation of jobs on the back of a revitalized industrial policy. So would you say that the electricity system as it is, or maybe in the next 2 years, is fit for purpose for this kind of strategy? Will it be able to, in fact, support an industrialization strategy, particularly knowing that manufacturing is very high intensive in terms of energy? And I think also maybe if we can get clarity on what's happening in terms of transmission funding. We do understand that the minister went out to market because there needs to be an expansion of the grid, and there needs to be more transmission lines put through in that regard. So just answering that question in terms of the energy provision and the industrialization, and also how many jobs is it that you're hoping to?
My question is on your priority number 2 in your manifesto about protecting strategic industries like steel. There has been problems in the steel sector where ArcelorMittal has been saying they would close some of their plants in Newcastle and Vanderbilt Park. That has been held off for about 6 months or so. Just in terms of detail, what do you see as plans to protect these industries?
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was the last question. I'm going to ask Comrade Hosienso to also speak to I will start with yourself, Comrade Zuko, and I'll ask Mamluko to just round up. But Comrade Zuko and then Comrade Sputler, and then and Comrade Cindy to respond very briefly, and then we round up with the ETC chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mahleng. Norman, let me put it like this. when you read the ANC manifesto 30 years from now, it will pretty much retain the same structure. Each election cycle, we bring an iteration of the same manifesto with specific focus areas. For instance, the ANC believes that education is a public good and therefore it must be publicly funded. So we'll always talk about it, even as the numbers are increasing. That is why the text of the manifesto says, we will continue to, we will ramp up this and that. We will always believe that healthcare is a public good. So even when we are registering progress, we are still going to emphasize areas of incremental progress. It's not a function of failure or a lack of progress. Even where there is failure, it's failure on areas of policy commitment on the part of the ANC. So that is why you interpret it as a cut and paste. It's not. It is about seamless progress over what we'll be doing going forward. The other part, Naledi, you are correct. One of the inputs that are central to a successful industrialization strategy is electricity. So we do believe that sorting out energy security is a strategic pillar for industrialization action plan going forward. So that is why the manifesto speaks about ensuring energy security in order to power up the economy overall. What we are actually doing, but Comrade Sputler will deal with the transmission funding elements and so on, is even in solving the energy security problem, elements of it will feed into the industrial strategy. If, for instance, we are rolling out green energy solutions, and that includes solar panels, using that problem at the same time. How many jobs do we seek from industrialization? Industrialization is a long-term process. I would say to you, looking at the unemployment state as a whole is going to be guided by ambitions to power up this thing. So it's going to take us time, but we want to start in the first 5 years as the launch pad for that over time. Gloria, protecting strategic industries and steel is falling. That's true. There's going to be a press conference dedicated just to that priority. That's priority 2 of the manifesto. But you are correct. One of the reasons the industrial strategy speaks about protecting specific industries is a recognition that